2011, 10 years ago, F1 was in an era which most people remember fairly fondly. Red Bull were dominating. Schumacher was still... Oh, was he? I don't know. He returned at some point. Doesn't matter. That's not the point. Schumacher is irrelevant in this story. There are 20 drivers driving in Formula 1 this year. And 10 years ago, some of them were still driving in F1. Some of them were very much not driving in F1. So I thought, let's take a look at the 2021 grid 10 years ago. This has been done before, specifically Tomo F1. I'll put a link to his video. He did F1 7 years ago, but with last year's grid. So I thought I would do it 10 years ago with this year's grid. Mainly because I didn't want to do the same thing, and I thought actually you got 3 new rookies and I'm doing it a bit longer ago, so it's not exactly the same video. So let's get started with the reigning champion Lewis Hamilton. And 10 years ago, he was obviously still in F1. He was 26 years of age. He came 5th in that F1 that season. He was driving with McLaren, scoring 227 points. Managed 3 wins at China, Germany and Abu Dhabi, and 6 podiums. A decent start for him. At the time he was only a one-time world champion, and his first world championship with Mercedes wouldn't come until 2014, or wait, that's it, 2015, sorry. 2015 is when he really began to, prove that he would be one of the best, if he hadn't already shown that. 5th in F1, very decent season. But moving on next to Valtteri Bottas, his teammate, he was only 21 in 2011 at the time, and he was not in Formula 1, but he had been, that season was his first season as a test driver for Williams, which we know this is the team he started at. He raced in GP3 and British F3, the Macau GP, where he retired after qualifying 4th. He only raced 3 races in F3, and one, that's kind of, didn't make sense, came first in one of them. And his kind of the main talking point of his 2011 season was the fact he won the GP title, the GP3 title, with 4 wins and 7 podiums. 2011 was a pretty good year for Valtteri Bottas. I believe it was actually the year after that he joined Williams, so good year for him. Then moving on to Max Verstappen, he was only 13 in 2011, so he was still in karting. He won the WSK Euro Series, which you'll see features quite a lot in this video. In a KRG, it is the car he won that in. He was also picked for the KF2 class, winning the Master Series of the KF2 class in karting. So a very successful 2011 for him. Two big talking points there, winning the WSK Euro Series, which is very big. If you do karting, you will know that is quite a big feat, and you'll see a lot of people were also in that same season, as we'll get onto, which he beat to win that WSK Euro Series title. Also, winning the Master Series of the KF2 class is, winning anything in kind of regional national karting is very, very admirable. So very good 2011 for Max Verstappen, and we know obviously he went on 10 years later to race in Formula 1. So next up, Sergio Perez. 2011 was his debut year in Formula 1 with Sauber. He came 16th with 14 points out of 28 drivers. Some of those drivers were only temporary, didn't race all the races. And his best finish was a 7th at the British Grand Prix. So yeah, a debut year for Perez. 16th in his debut year. Well, it was a decent, I think, with Sauber. 14 points. He would end up getting a McLaren drive a year or two later. So must have been pretty seen as quite good from McLaren. But yeah, considering there were 28 drivers who competed across the season, I think 16th in a debut season with 14 points isn't too bad. It's not the best, but it's not bad. Next up, Lando Norris. I'll just say before, Sergio Perez was 21 years old at the time. Lando Norris, however, one of the youngest, the second youngest, you'll see on this list, 11 years old in 2011. And he raced in the Super 1 British karting, where he, the famous video of the interview from him, which will be on screen now, that is the interview just after or before he was on pole position. Of the race he was about to do. So obviously not much is known. He was only 11 years old, and he hadn't even started single-seater racing yet. He was still in the karts as well. So interesting season for Norris. 2 years later, 2011, he would go on to win the World Karting Championship. So he must have been doing something right in 2011. Next up, Daniel Ricciardo, and he was at the age of 21, the third driver on this list to 21, and I believe the last as well. So yeah, Bottas, Perez and Ricciardo, all 21 in 2011. He was racing in Formula Renault 3.5, coming 5th in that championship with 144 points. But halfway through that F1 2011, he joined HRT Formula 1 team for the second half of that season. He only managed 27th in his debut, with the highest finish of 18th, but considering he only drove for the second half of the season, and also it was his first season, you know, you can't really expect a lot. He didn't manage any points, obviously with his highest only being 18th, but he was racing for HRT. Next up, the veteran Alonso. He was, of course, in F1 at the time. Everybody knows he was in F1 at the time. He was racing with Ferrari. Came 4th with 1 win, 10 podiums, that win coming at Silverstone in the British Grand Prix. It was only obviously 2016, so about 5-6 years later, or 17, when he would end up leaving F1, and now he has returned. So he was already a 2-time world champion by now in 2011, but he was still 29 years old, so you know, now he is 39, so he's one of the oldest, not the oldest, because we know who the oldest is. But next up, Esteban Ocon, who at the time was 14, so a year older than Verstappen, and you can see he also raced in the WSK Euro Series, which is the one that, as I said before, Verstappen won. He came second, so he scored 55 points behind Max Verstappen, of course. Well, he didn't score 55 points, sorry, he was 55 points behind Max Verstappen. And he was signed by, I believe, a company called Gravity Sport Management. Gravity Sport Management, maybe, something like that. Which was a sister company of Renault F1. So you can see how that all kind of ties together with him actually racing for Renault last year. Pretty interesting there. Moving on to let me try that name again. Charles Leclerc, who was 13 at the time, same age as Verstappen, and he won the CIK FIA European KF2, which is a karting class, championship. He also won the FIA Under-18 World Karting Championship, so very successful year. As Verstappen, it seems that for 13-year-olds in 2011, it was a great year to be in karting. Really good year for Charles, and clearly he was also doing something right in karting, because now he's a 2-time race winner and very likely a future world champion. Next up, Carlos Sainz was only 12 years old at the time. Oh, sorry, I've said he's not 12, sorry, he was 16. I've read the wrong person. Lance Stroll was 12 years old at the time. So he's 16-year-old, so one of the older kids, kind of like, you've got 3 stages of this list. You've got, you know, early 20s, kind of 20 and up, where you're racing in F1. Then you've got the 10 to 14s, still doing karting. And then you've got the kind of the late teenagers, who Sainz is one of. He did a lot. 17th in the Macau GP, 2nd place in Euro Cup Formula Renault 2.0, where he got 2 wins and 10 podiums. He raced 3 races in Euro Formula 3, and most importantly, or maybe most successfully, he won the Formula Renault 2.0 Northern European Cup, beating Kvyat and Van Dorn, who would also go on to be in future F1 drivers. So pretty good from a young age. He was pretty successful. Next up, another veteran, and this is probably the person who was most successful in the motorsport world in 2011 out of everybody on the planet, Sebastian Vettel. 2011 was the year he won his second F1 World Championship. He had 11 wins in his second World Championship season, 15 poles and 11 podiums. So yeah, you can't do much better than that. He won a world title in Formula 1 in 2011. Nothing more really to say there. Nothing short of impressive at the young age of 23. He is still the youngest ever world champion. Maybe someone will break in the future, possibly Tsunoda, Russell, Verstappen, who knows. But next up is Lance Stroll, who was 12 years old in 2011, and he was, in 2011, a member of the Ferrari Driver Academy, which I did not know. He used to be a member of the Ferrari Driver Academy. I always thought he was part of the Williams Academy. Maybe he never was. But he was racing in KF3 karting. He also raced in that WSK Euro Series along with Verstappen and Ocon, the Bridgestone Cup, and other karting championships, kind of around the world, really. However, there was nothing really to write home about. No big wins in any of those series. So 2011 wasn't actually a really strong year for Lance Stroll. I wonder if that probably fuels the haters who say obviously he's only in F1 because of money, which is kind of true, but also, has he proved his spot? I don't know. It's not for me to decide. Next up, Pierre Gasly, who was 15 years old, so a year younger than Sainz, a year older than Ocon. He was in French Formula 4, where he came third, 4 wins, 2 poles, 7 podiums, 104 points. Not the best season, not the worst season, a very solid season for the Frenchman in the French Formula 4. Not much else really to talk about there. Decent season for Pierre Gasly. Not a lot of competitions though, obviously. Coming third in Formula 4, there's not really much time for much else. Next up, the youngest driver in the grid, Tsunoda, who was only 10 in 2011. I don't know. Obviously, he turned 11, so he's 20 at the moment. So technically, exactly 10 years ago, he would have been 10. But there's really not much noted about him. I can't tell you a whole lot, but I can tell you that he raced in the Japanese Junior Karting Championship. And he must have been pretty good, because he then moved to regional in 2013 and then national karting by 2014. It is known that he moved up the ranks very, very quickly, only spending a year in each competition before moving up to the next step in his career. So really fast, kind of moving up. But at 10 years old, that's what he was racing. I don't know where he finished, but there are a few photos of him, as you can see. So yeah, interesting. Next up, the oldest member, Kimi Raikkonen, who is now 41. So in 2011, that means he was 31. At quick maths. So if you don't know about Kimi Raikkonen, he won the world title in 2007. I believe had one more season, and then took a break from Formula 1 before coming back in 2014, I think, or where he would then join Lotus and eventually Ferrari. But 2011 was during his break from Formula 1, or after 2009. He raced in the World Rally Championship, NASCAR Nationwide Series, and NASCAR Camping World Truck. However, no wins or podiums. So, pretty uneventful season. You can see why he moved back to F1. It's clearly where he was most successful. Moving on to someone who I kind of didn't realise they were so old, but Antonio Giovinazzi was 17, so he is now obviously 27 years old. I thought he was a lot younger than that. I thought he was around 24, 25 now, but he's not, he's 27, so I don't know, that's just something I'd kind of misjudged. But in 2011, he was obviously, as I said, 17 years old. He won the WSK Master Series in the KF2 class, which would then lead him on to join the Formula Pilota, I really don't know how to say that, Pilota Chinese Championship in 2012, which he would win. So, winning the WSK Masterclass Series in KF2 clearly did him some good. Moving on then, the Brit George Russell, who at the time was 13 years old, same age as Verstappen and Leclerc. And George Russell won the SKUSA national title, and soon after that would win the European Karting Championship. So only one competition in 2011, but that competition led on to big things for him, and obviously eventually the F1 seat, probably a future world champion with Mercedes from 2022. Moving on next to the Canadian Nicholas Latifi, who at the time, I need to say at the time of the recording, in 2011, 10 years ago, was 15 years old. He was only in his third season of karting. As you know, he started very early. He started karting when he was 13 years old. So in 2011, he raced all around America and Canada karting series. And his only real achievement in 2011 was that he was runner-up in the Canadian Karting Championship. So yeah, only third season in karting for Nicholas Latifi in 2011. You can see how he had quite a quick climb up the ranks as well. Obviously helped out a lot by the fact his father owns Lavazza, Savina, etc. Mick Schumacher, the son of the great Michael Schumacher. I know everyone says that every time, but it's an easy introduction. He raced in KF3 class of the ADAC Kart Masters, coming 9th, and also coming 3rd in the Euro Winter Cup Kart Championship. So very decent season, year for him. 9th is not great, but you have to remember Schumacher was only 12 at the time in 2011. So, you know, when you're 12, 9th and 3rd in some pretty big karting competitions is fairly impressive. Then moving on to Nikita Mazepin. In 2011, he was also 22, but this was only his first year of driving. That's right, he started driving at the age of 12 or 11, and he was driving in European Karting Championships. However, he had no wins or podiums because that was his first year of karting. Pretty ambitious to go straight to the European Karting Championships, but there you go, that's the end of the grid. There you go, that is Haas, and that is who I think is going to be bottom. That's why I did them last. But there you go, those are 20 drivers, 10 years ago. Bit of a time rewind, but hope you liked it. Hope that taught you something. I think some of them are probably quite well known, Alonso, Raikkonen and Hamilton, but you know, maybe some of the Tsunoda, Giovinazzi, Sainz, maybe those lot. I feel like most people don't really know their karting careers, so thanks a lot. I'll see you in a bit.